So I was racking my brains about where to start on my next Red Dead Mystery Revisited video, and then I was contacted via email regarding one of the topics that I had on my list already. This individual goes by the Reddit username El and he sent over a folder filled with information about the burnt down town of Limpany. So instead of twiddling my thumbs for another day, I decided this is the next subject we're revisiting, so please enjoy Limpany Revisited.
Poor little Limpany. Such a shame what happened there, and so easily avoided.
The town of Limpany can be found along the Dakota River south of Valentine, located a mere stone's throw away from Horseshoe Overlook. Upon arriving at the town, it's instantly noticeable that the place has burnt down. A blaze has ravaged the town, burning every single building aside from the stone jailhouse. A lot of the buildings are burnt beyond all recognition. However, we do have McCluskey's Saloon, Brewster's Provisions, and the Sheriff's Office. Inside the Sheriff's Office, under a burnt desk, we can find an intact steel box. Inside the lockbox, we can find a gold bar and a pamphlet for special horse stimulant. Besides that, there is no real interaction to have here at Limpany that has anything to do with the town itself. If you head into the stone jailhouse, however, you will find two corpses who appear to have died from smoke inhalation, likely left to die while the rest of the town evacuated. If you pre-ordered the game prior to August 15th, 2018, you can find a treasure map here as well, but again, that's not really about Limpany. But there is some correlation of note, which we'll come back to in a little bit. What's interesting is there is no mention of the town in any newspaper article, and characters seldom mention Limpany existing at all, and when it is mentioned, it's more often used as a guide to find a different location altogether and yields no interesting information about this place. However, Madame Nazar in Red Dead Online has this to say.
Poor little Limpany. Such a shame what happened there, and so easily avoided.
What does this mean? Well, let's look into it. Around the town of Limpany, you may notice absolutely tons of blue barrels, labelled Cornwall kerosene and tar. There are a lot of these barrels, and they all carry likely kerosene and or tar, which are flammable materials. And there are definitely enough of these barrels around to start a blaze big enough that it would engulf the entirety of the town, as the flames would spread from wooden building to wooden building, which is also a flammable material. And considering how flammable kerosene and tar can be, that is a combination that is made for disaster. And so if the barrels were spread out around town as we see them, then it would definitely go a long way in ensuring that a fire in one part of the town reaches another part of the town. However, if the barrels were a huge source factor in this fire, then it would be strange that they're more intact than the town itself is, at least in some instances. Of course, the eyebrow raiser about these barrels is they bear the name of Leviticus Cornwall, and his barrels do have a habit of showing up at the site of a suspicious fire. It could imply Leviticus Cornwall's own dodgy deeds, or it could imply that the material inside the barrel is flammable, of which kerosene and tar both are. However, I'm not entirely sure how this town could stand in the way of Leviticus Cornwall's oil empire, and Madame Nazar's line implies that what happened here was an accident that could have easily been avoided. And if this was one of Cornwall's many misdeeds, that's probably what he'd want you to think. However, I fail to see how that detail would escape the grasp of a fortune teller, unless this statement was intended to prompt you to investigate the town, as there's more to it than it seems, and fortune teller speech in this game is often very cryptic. I suppose the next question is then, why would Leviticus Cornwall want to get rid of this tiny, insignificant town? What purpose would it serve to burn this place to the ground? And the obvious answer is there really isn't a purpose to it, and so if that is an angle to look at this from, there's got to be more layers to it. So back to Limpany for the time being, it would appear as if this town was relatively new at the time that it burnt down. Inside the burnt saloon we can find charred crates but no furnishings. Inside the general store we can find no evidence that it was ever up and running, because in the state that the building is in there would at least be some remnant of burnt furnishings, and in a fire there's no way you'd be able to save everything inside the building. And then as far as the town itself is concerned, there appears to be no form of church here. In this time period, a church was among the first buildings erected in any new settlement, to meet its inhabitants' spiritual needs. The lack of a church being present leads me to believe that Limpany was very much so still in the process of being constructed, or at least finished. So the only things we have to go off for the time being are the names of the saloon and the general store. The saloon is called McCluskey, and that doesn't really go anywhere. However, the name Brewster does. The treasure hunt started here courtesy of the map found on one of the corpses in the jail cells. If followed to the very end, will lead you to the treasure, which is located in the cemetery in Saint Denis. And in this cemetery you can find a grave for the name Brewster. If that's related, I don't know. It could just be a red herring or very simply unrelated coincidence, but this too is a dead end either way. Now, with all these barrels presumably carrying flammable material strewn about, it's an obvious fire hazard. You can also find matches and cigarettes on a windowsill on the first floor of the saloon, which is the upstairs to clear up any confusion, as I know Americans and such refer to it as the second floor, and there will also be cigarettes strewn about nearby. And that's all it would take to light the contents of these barrels up, so an easily avoided accident leading to the burning down of this poor town is entirely possible. And if there were no other factors to consider, that's where I'd leave it. This part of the Heartlands is absolutely infested with criminal activity, from small gangs to the O'Driscoll's heavy presence in the region, to Leviticus Cornwall's own robber baron operation, not to mention the 4 different serial killers you can encounter in Valentine, which is only a short ride away. The Heartlands is a rough area, and would criminals have a reason to come to Limpany? Well, if you spend about 30 seconds there, you can find a gold bar and also a treasure map that, if you follow to the end, leads you to 6 gold bars, and in total that's worth $3,500. So I'd argue, yes, criminals would have a purpose to go to Limpany if they knew about that. Things get more interesting when you realise this isn't the only location that's burnt up in the immediate vicinity. Only a short distance northeast you can find the Brush Fire, a burnt up piece of woodland too close to Limpany to be discounted. In a lockbox found here, you can find the pamphlet for volatile fire bottles, implying that this was the handiwork of a volatile fire bottle. With the assistance of some kerosene or tar laying around, this could easily burn down a town. And so here is my theory about what happened at Limpany. In search of maybe rumoured treasure, criminals burnt the town down to search for it, starting the fire subtly in one corner of the town, knowing that the kerosene and tar laying around would lead to it spreading quickly. The townsfolk evacuated. When the coast was clear, the criminals began to search, but due to the fire and risk of being caught if they stayed, they couldn't stay long and therefore didn't find anything. That or there were 2 of them and one betrayed the other, locking him in a jail cell before succumbing himself to smoke asphyxiation, which is where we find the treasure map and would explain why this cell is open. As for Limpany, being a relatively new town, still for the most part under construction, many would have assumed the fire was an accident and gone back to their unaffected daily lives. Hence why the town rarely gets mentioned by anybody. That or it really was an accident. However, what makes me believe that it's more is the name. Bit of obscure history, but Betty Limpany was executed by hanging in Devon in the year 1799, aged between 17 and 18 years old, because she'd been accused of arson whilst working as a maid and had allegedly burnt down her master's home. This is very obscure, but there was a film made about it in 1997, though good luck finding a copy. Off the back of that, the town's name Limpany could be associated with arson. Another possibility is the town refused to do business with Leviticus Cornwall, and this angered him. And since he's been shown to condone violence against those who won't cooperate with him in the past, it's entirely possible that this led to the burning of Limpany, but I wouldn't understand in that scenario why Cornwall would have his men leave so many Cornwall kerosene and tar barrels laying around. And so I think I'll stick to the theory I proposed on this one, and that is that Limpany was burnt down, but due to the hazards was assumed to be an accident. What's most creepy about this spot in the main game is how it's almost never mentioned. It never becomes relevant. It's just there, the burnt down town of Limpany. It has a marker on the map. Hardly any characters will ever mention it, and for the most part when they do, they'll be using it as a marker point for another location for reference. It does get a little more use in Red Dead Online, but nothing really yields any information. All we know is it was burnt down at some point prior to 1898. The simplest explanation is once upon a time there may have been more information yielded about Limpany, however it was cut, and all we're left with is a somber, ambient location with no concrete story as to its origins or how it burnt down. But at least the brushfire, Limpany and the river form a sad face when looking at it from the sky. Isn't that lovely? So huge thanks to Reddit user El Matador for allowing me to look over some of his stuff that he's gathered over the years with regards to this location. It was incredibly helpful, and this video wouldn't have been the same without his input. And of course a huge personal thank you for thinking of me on that one and reaching out. And thank you all for watching this video. I hope that you've enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be super fantastic. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care and goodbye.